This is hi everyone. We're about to talk about maintaining connection through tension. Yes, maintaining our sense of humor and staying connected to each other. I thought this would be appropriate because today is actually, I don't know if you know this, folks, International Self-Care Day. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. So, and I have some very fabulous women with me today with extensive backgrounds of all kinds about self-care. So we are going to jump right in, I think. Let me introduce our fantastic guests. We have Nicole Levey here. She's a veteran of the beauty business for 25 years. So we're going to get some tips there too. But during COVID, she had a change of heart, or an expansion of heart, we should say, and moved into the senior business, which is so fantastic and heartwarming. And she is in sales and outreach at Watermark, as you can see from her logo. And we are big fans of Watermark, gotta say. We do a lot of work with the people there, running lots of interactive workshops to create connection. So we're so thrilled that Nicole could join us today.
Thank
And
you.
then additionally, we have Ferrisa Connell, who sent me the most awesome bio. But I'm just going to tell you this right now, that Ferrisa is known for her social impact in all kinds of media. And she has many clients, big and small, that she helps to create an inclusive DEI message, because that is also her area of expertise. And she's currently working at McKinsey as the director of DEI. Did I get that right,
In
Farissa?
booth, in booth.
And
And
what did I say? MCAT?
McKinsey, but I did do McKinsey, so
You
we're there.
did McKinsey, right? She was in the accelerator program at McKinsey. She's currently at M Booth. Okay, before I botch any other introductions, let's please, I'd love if each of you could just tell a little bit about your journey with tension. No, about some experience that brought you to where you are. I've covered a little bit. And yeah, I'd love to know some moment of tension that you've experienced and would handle differently today than you might have back then. So, Farissa, why don't you go first?
Absolutely. I'm trying to think. I mean, the back then part I got. The now I'm evolving day by day, but I just remember earlier in my career, really trying to find my voice and not knowing, like working with a lot of like amazing executive leaders and just powerhouse folks. I've come from a hustle, well, formerly a hustle culture where, I'm not afraid to like roll up my hands, get my hands dirty, roll up my sleeves, get my hands dirty. So yeah, like just working in a very fast-paced industry where you have to meet deadlines and wanting to impress folks and everything, I found myself in my younger 20s of wanting to like people please a lot. And that internalized the way I managed stress back then was, whew, flashbacks right now, was not probably the best versus now I've kind of found my voice and I've kind of know how to advocate for myself better. And just now I'm able to help other folks, navigate those tough conversations that may have, especially with those who are like myself, high performers. So
Right. You know what? I skipped a beat, and I wish you could fill us in just a little bit on those back in the day roll up the sleeves and how you ended up working and advocating for equality.
absolutely. So I've come from a very passionate family that's always been plugged into the community. So like that I'm naturally always seeking to help folks. So in college I did like 25 internships and like that's true. I have a list of them all, and not because I'm an opportunist or anything like that, but because, if you want to have a career in PR marketing, there's a lot of, industries that has evolved to what we know it is today. So I was very like hungry to learn, and through those different experiences, I kind of had my North Star really be social impact. So I found myself really having a heart for nonprofits and working in the nonprofit industry for about 10 plus years. But ultimately, I've had a lot of skill sets in working in marketing, multicultural beauty. So that kind of is how I kind of came to in booth and everything. But with working in the nonprofit industry, which many may relate, it is very demanding, a lot of good work. But who people are people. And time is time and money is money. So like there's a lot that goes into it, where the pressures of like trying to make something with maybe not as many resources, or navigating with different co-workers, or just the demands of the job.
Great. I definitely want to come back to tension in the nonprofit space because, right, who would think that, right? Aren't we all just here to be generous souls? Okay, so, and Nicole, tell us a little bit about how you come to this. I know I kind of touched on it, but I'd love to know more, a little more personally for you.
Sure, absolutely. And I love what Ferrisa said. I'm going to piggyback off of her a little bit too. I came into the senior living industry after 30 years in the luxury beauty business. So I didn't know senior living even existed. I didn't know there were retirement communities because I was so far removed from that world. I was focused on vanity, high profile, luxury, right? And like Ferrisa said, people are people, and even though you're in the beauty business, it's still extremely demanding. Lots of personalities, lots of demands. You're dealing with everybody from producers and directors to talents directly, to being on set or being in high profile situations. So you really do have to learn how to grow a thick skin and pivot pretty quickly in order to establish your own brand and establish your own relationship. And when I started in the industry, probably before Ferrisa, it's safe to say, this was the age before social media, before computers, before even cell phones. So in those days, you're really selling yourself. Were you on time? Were you professional? Did the talent like you? Were you agreeable, right? Were you not too starstruck at the time? Well, did you do your job well? So we were judged on those types of like characteristics. And then in order to grow your personal brand, it was just word of mouth. Like one director liked you, so he would bring you on to another set, or one talent really liked you and said, I request her for the next job. I'd like to work with her again. So you really had to build yourself and create your own identity and manage all of that while still doing your art, right? Doing what you were called to do, doing what you loved. So I kind of took some time during COVID to step away from the beauty business for the first time in my whole life. And I found senior living, and I'll touch on something that Ferrisa kind of rang a bell for me. The people pleaser, right? I've always kind of been a people pleaser myself, but I've also been extremely attracted to the senior demographic personally. I've always had a friend or a family friend or close to my grandparents. I've always sort of had a senior best friend just because I feel so connected to their histories and their stories, and what was it like living in like a completely different era. And a dear friend of mine who is no longer with us sort of inspired me to get into this industry. And she didn't get to see me actually move into the role. She passed before I moved into the industry, but it calls you, I believe. And I feel like, Dani, your story as well, with your background and your family, like senior living, you don't raise your hand and go to college and say, yay, I want to be in the senior living industry. It sort of finds you in different ways. And that's what landed me here. It sort of found me and it called me. And being that I had a servant's heart and was always in hospitality and pleasing people, that's how I found my way to this industry.
That's so interesting because, of course, now it is a whole academic study, right? You can
Absolutely.
actually gerontology. Some of
Sure.
my good friends are gerontologists and they're dedicated to that. I'm curious, since we're talking about tension and breaking tension now in the role that you currently have, Nicole, certainly as bringing families with aging parents to have to make decisions, I'm wondering if you could speak a little to that kind of tension that you've experienced and maybe some ways that you have found to mitigate some of that.
I mean, certainly there is tension, bringing families, bringing their loved ones here, or to any community for that matter. They have to let go. So they do come in armed. They come in defensive, maybe a little bit of denial. Maybe there's sibling rivalry. Maybe mom is dreams about coming to a retirement community, but dad's like, you are never getting me out of this chair, out of this home. I'm never leaving here. So there is like, you have to actively read the room. You
Mm.
have to use your people skills, read the room. And when there is tension, I like, two things. I'm an active listener, number one, and I think that that is the most valuable thing in what I do, is just to really actively listen. And when you're listening actively, you can read that tension. And again, it's not spoken tension. You could tell siblings are not getting along, or mom and dad, or vice versa, are not getting along. So I think one of the ways that I release tension when I read that room, I like storytelling. It's one of my favorite kind of tools in my toolbox to use when I can feel the tension. I'll just ask for a story. Like, tell me something about you, mom, that maybe you haven't shared with your kids in a while, or what does your day look like? Kind of break the tension with giving them a little spotlight, right? Giving them a little moment, giving them
Mm.
a little bit of spotlight to kind of dissipate that rivalry or that tension between family members. Ask them to tell me a story. And when they start talking about themselves, there's a sense of pride. They start to relax. It creates memories. They start to reminisce. Then the family starts to reminisce, and maybe that's a connector. So I like to use a lot of storytelling when I'm trying to read the room and break up a little bit of tension.
That's such a great tip. And obviously that's a big part of what Laughter on Call does as well, is create stories and have people build on the stories. But you brought up this idea of active listening and it not being just with the words. And I found this statistic, which I thought was really fascinating, that more than 93% of human, can't even say it properly, human communication is nonverbal. 93%,
That's
over
insane.
93%. So
Yeah.
body language, facial expressions, and other methods can convey stress without speaking.
Exactly. I
So,
think that goes back to reading the room. It's not always a spoken tension, or, they walk in with, how are they walking in? Are they united when they walk in? Are they sitting next to each other? Are they addressing each other by name? Is there a fondness? You can read all of that, and that comes from just years of being around people, right? Years of just being people pleasing, being able to read the room and pick up on those little tricks, and using your toolbox to sort of diffuse them unbeknownst to them, right? That's how you really won them over. If you can just be yourself and give them a little grace, that goes such a long way in what I do and in the families that I work with on a daily
well,
basis.
great. And Ferrisa, we have to hear the, your tools and skills, because I know that you've got some.
Everything you're saying, Nicole, is like resonating. A big bulk of my job currently is active listening. What I've learned over my years is that people want to feel seen and they want to be heard. And so it's not so much of what you can do for them always, but there is creating that space for them to be able to relax, to be able to find their words. And to be honest, when we talk about tension, that looks different in every single body. As a person of color, internalizing stress may come off as irritability, and do managers understand that they may have an employee who may not be as expressive or ready to face the day and charged up, even though they're a great high performer. It's like maybe they do need a little check-in, and that even just different generations and everything articulate things. You do have folks who are very direct, but when it comes to body language and everything, some folks do need to have a space, whether especially in this remote day and age that we're in, but have a space where they're able to go off camera, where they just need to, there's so much sensory overload constantly through Slack messaging, through being on camera on Zoom. So being able to advocate for employees and just people, because Nicole, you're dealing with families people come into work where they have families all the time and communities and real life issues happening. So they're bringing that to work. And so if you're asking somebody to show up at work and be in their authentic self, it's really hard for them to like just forget about everything else. So you have to create space. So I'm seeing that a lot in this.
I love that, Ferrisa. I love like that, giving them the space, right? And this digital age where in this generation, your generation, this is what all of what you know. In my generation, it's not what we know. We didn't come from that. So the adult children that we work with are of a different generation. They've learned it. They're not masters by any means, but you're right. Like just knowing, like giving them that little grace, right? Just a little bit to sort of like be heard, be seen. Employees as well. I loved when you touched on that, because I'm very expressive. You know, I wear my heart on my sleeve. I wear almost everything on my sleeve. But just to be able to be like, to have that check-in of like, hey, how was your morning? Or, you know, how about some fresh air before we start the day, versus like jumping right into call after Zoom after meeting. And you're like, oh, wow, that 5 minutes of fresh air, or that little walk around just to maybe say hi to, you know, in my environment, say hi to the members, say hi to our residents. What a relief. Just allowing a little bit of that grace and a little bit of that space. That really makes sense.
And I'm pretty sure with both of you girls' work, like folks want to make friends. It's so we're so humans at the end of the day. You strip us down. Like folks just really want to connect with other people, and connection is so important right now. No matter just saying hello to somebody you met at the grocery store, or like, you know, asking somebody if they need help. Folks, like there's a lot of folks right now have increased social anxiety because they don't want to say the wrong thing. They don't know how they're going to be well received. And so I love what you all are doing on Laughter on Call, because like it truly is so like a laugh can go such a long way. But folks could be like, oh, I can't break the ice. It's just like before you get into a meeting, just talk to people. Like that's it. Just ask them. And it doesn't have to be how they're doing. It could just be like, hey, I thought this was interesting, da da da, you know, and one thing leads to another. So I think sometimes as humans, we complicate human connection a little bit, but you know.
There's so much expectation there too, right? Like not everybody is Dani or myself or Ferrisa who can walk into a room and sort of just be present and really, you know, we really have a good, strong sense of self. We work with Laughter on Call in a sense, going back to the icebreakers, we work with some of Dani's team, and we've actually brought some of her team in to do professional icebreakers with our networking group. So we've brought in Nikki, who is phenomenal. I just want to shout out and give her a little plug. And she actually has helped me break the ice in these large group settings where we are all colleagues and in the same industry, but we don't know each other. And not everybody, again, is that like go, go, go personality. It's a little harder for some people to break out of that social anxiety. And we do these phenomenal icebreakers. And I'm telling you, by the end of these like 6 or 7 minute exercises, people are hugging, they're exchanging numbers, they are like going to dinner, they're like, when can we meet up for a drink? Because it's so fun. It just like it just takes all that pressure off, and you connect. And that's so powerful.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. You know, I'm so curious because Ferrisa, you are in a graduate program at Penn currently. Is that right?
Yeah.
Busy girl.
Yeah.
And are they talking? I'm curious if the curriculum has moved, if the needle has moved, if you will, toward this human connection focus in our post-COVID world, and what that looks like from an academic perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, my program particularly, I have classmates who are all parts of the world. So like we were just on a call last week, and I had folks who were in Brazil, somebody who was, you know, in Egypt, and a professor who had just came back from South Korea. So like folks are like for us to all speak different languages and wanting to, like, we're working in social impact space. So like the social policy, nonprofit leadership, some are social workers. For us to like come together, people are like, are humans all are global citizens, you know, like what are we experiences in different places? So that is really at the focal point of what they're kind of centering folks are, like, how are we engaging? What are our best practices and whatnot?
Yeah, super interesting. So I don't know if you all know that Laughter on Call is a case study for Harvard Business School. And one of the things I found interesting when I went to speak to all of them is they asked me about, so do you hire like the funniest person? Does it have to be like the funniest person? And I surprised them because I was like, actually not, no, like we need people who want who are eager and open and bring light to the room and bring human connection and create a space of safety for people, because a lot of the time that's what we're dealing either with Alzheimer's or with feelings of isolation. And so I'm pleased to hear that, this idea of human connection, although we started in the senior space dealing with isolation, it is not unique. Like, it is global at this point. And so I do think these people skills, which I'm not allowed to say soft skills anymore because I got chastised for that at a UCLA conference, which the woman was like, this is no longer a soft skill. Like, human connection is no longer a soft skill. So so I really appreciate hearing about how it's evolving and that you're actually on the front lines with it. So I'm wondering, given your different work experiences, like if you have any specifics about a moment, a tense moment, or Ferrisa, in your case, a problem that was brought to you where tension really needed to be addressed and how you handled that. So for each of you, if you have something specific, that would be awesome for our listeners.
Oh, well, like I've been a manager for myself, and I have so much heart and love for all managers, both near and far. And I mean, myself included, I feel like sometimes when you're having to maybe give feedback, that could be a little bit more intimidating to folks. And some people don't like, they get very defensive maybe of how you're presenting information to them. But I've like learned, and one of the best practices I've learned is to really like, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, let me layer the feedback into like the hamburger and start off with the positive and then, get to the thing and then make sure it's smooth. Like, that is a tactic, and if it works, it works, but you have to like, everybody's different. So I like to like ask people like what it is that you would that you want to get from this call or this session, or what feedback are you looking for to kind of spotlight. So then that way I can really see where they are hearing from themselves of like, okay, I have this, because a lot of times we like talking about ourselves, but we don't like to talk about the bad things about ourselves. Or not necessarily bad, but just like the not so like sexy parts or whatever. So it's just like, it's work. We're sensitive. A lot of us are creators. So like, just talking, having those conversations and guiding them, and being able to be like, okay, well, maybe they didn't come up, their best executive self in a certain meeting. And so just how they handled a client or a call or a conversation with a colleague could be a little bit more smoother. So just really not like ridiculing people and just, humanizing of just like, it's okay. Like, this isn't like demystifying or, making sure that they feel good of going in, but really meeting their needs first before I come in and just say, hey, this is what I have. So really seeking to understand rather than be understood.
Right. So if you call the meeting though, like if you're directed to address something and they have no idea what you're talking about. So
I mean, usually I'm big on check-ins. So like, I'm never going to be, I don't like allowing information to come off left from people. I think I feel like I've had that experience before and it didn't feel good, where it's coming out of nowhere. So like, I think it's very much okay to like being able to say, hey, I want to talk to you about something that came up, or like, hey, let's get some time on the books to be able to discuss, XYZ and everything. I want to get your thoughts and your sides, and really coming in of like, hey, I'm not accusing, I'm not, pointing fingers, I'm not trying to like burst your bubble. Like, I'm here to support you because I want to see you grow. And I think especially in managers and just people managers, more importantly, every human's different. So you kind of know, some people are very humorous, some people are very just kind of like, I'm just here to collect a check and I gotta go. So they want to be in and out. So you kind of gauge on what those conversations look like. But I think a lot of times we run away from conflict versus leaning into conflict.
Yeah, I mean, you said, I love like, you weren't exactly your best executive self in that meeting. Like, that is very gentle way of, bringing behavior to someone's attention. And also like no ridicule. That's a big laughter on call. We're affiliative humor, no ridicule. And then the other point that you talked about just instinctively is timing, right? Is like when you break the tension, when it's appropriate to step in. So I think that's another really something to be sensitive to. And Nicole, what I'm sure you've had some tension at the community because you've got a lot of staff
Lots of staff, lots of staff. I love what Ferrisa said, and I mimic her sort of style, if you will, on communication. I always go in most of the time when we're doing our check-ins. As a professional, you know what your weaknesses are, right? You know your strengths, and you know where there's, I say always where there, I don't like to say weaknesses, I say room for improvement. You know where your room for improvement is, right? So if that email does need to go out, or that face-to-face conversation needs to go out, the other party is usually aware of what that is, and they kind of see it coming a little bit, because again, you know your own self as a business person where there's room for improvement. So I go in the same way Ferrisa does. How did that work for you, right? Like, I try to ask the question, how did that meeting go for you today? Get their feedback, and so I can put myself in the shoes of in their shoes. So I'm getting a completely different perspective. How did that meeting go for you? How successful was it for you? Do you felt like you could have done anything more? Do you feel like you had the tools that you needed at that time? Really drill down on how the experience was for them. And then with my expertise, my skills, I can then tweak it and say, would this have worked better for you? Do you think that you can adopt this best practice for the next interaction? It's a share versus a tell, right? I feel like Freeze saying, it's more of like a warm and fuzzy, it's a share. But having that feedback really helps you formulate how you want to bring your messages across to the person that you're talking to. When I'm listening, I'm formulating, right? Now I know what type personality I'm dealing with. I know the sensitivity. I know a little bit more about what I feel will work or what strategies will work. And I think that breaks tension too. When you're allowing the other person to maybe even get that off their chest, vent a little bit, right? Or just say, gosh, you know what? I wasn't my best self in that meeting. I'd gotten a call like 15 minutes ago that my sister's cat is stuck in a tree and I'm super stressed for her. Wow, that makes sense. Like, humanizing, right? Oh, wow, I'm sorry that happened. Take a couple minutes, let's regroup, and let me know how that went for you with that being said. So it's that validation, and I think that slow on ramp and getting that information that's going to help reduce tension in those moments where we are coaching, right? As managers, we coach. It's our responsibility to coach our teams and to make them stronger, but we can't do that unless we understand where they are in that moment, or in their day, or in their week, or in their month.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's beautiful. I mean, what you're talking about is staying curious, right? That's such a hot word right now, is to stay curious. But it's not just a word. It actually, involves asking questions and listening, active listening, as you said. And then something else that you said, Nicole, that you said instinctively about, like, so that you can get into their headspace, and it's like that's like empathy 101. Like, can you be in someone else's head and understand where they're coming from so that you don't attack, because you don't get it.
And you won't get the same feedback if you as the coach go in on the defense. If you don't open that door, your feedback is going to be met with pushback. And as a coach and as a leader, that's the last thing we want. It's not an I game. It's a we game. We are all on the same team. So there's no, just because I'm a manager doesn't mean that you don't have equally the same skill set that I do. I just happen to have that role, or that role was better suited for me because. So I try not to create levels, right? It's we as a team, we can, all of us together here at, in my world. So we can't do it without each other. We function wholly to serve our seniors as a team. And it's really, really important.
And I love that because I feel like the best managers that I personally ever had that I see and when we see reports are those who are championing folks daily. It's not like we all make mistakes. We all have bad days. We're humans. So those who are really championing and invested, not beyond just the professional development aspect, right? Like it's great that you might want to champion somebody's career, but somebody say, you know what? I want to see you win. I want to see you succeed. I want to see you, get it right, or like you meet the goals that you set for yourself. And that in order to do that, it is a team effort. And so I think going, especially when it's tension, it's like you're just not in the trenches by yourself in this. Like I'm here with you. So like what can we do to be solution oriented to be able to get the outcome that we're desiring here?
Love it. Love proactivity. Love the brainstorming of what works for you. Like, I don't know everything. So what was your experience with this in your other roles, right? Getting to know how they function so that you can bring all of those best practices to the table. I've had sales training from, I've had some of the best sales training in the country to some of the not so best sales training in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And you take from that what works for your personality type and you start to learn best practices. But then with that being said, other people's experiences I think are also so valuable in creating tension, creating coaching opportunities. How were you once coached where you were like, wow, they really, I felt heard, I felt listened to, they appreciated my feedback, they really, took I felt very feel my interest was really looked after, my best interest. So I remember that sometimes too, like, oh, what were the times where I was coached by, a leader who I was like, wow, that's a thought leader. That's someone whose practices I want to adopt. That's someone whose practices I want to emulate, because I left with that takeaway of, wow, I'm valued today, or I was
Right.
heard today. And I think that also breaks tension when you can leave with a takeaway of just like, I feel better, or I feel great, or it was a hard conversation, but I got through it. And I'm glad it was with that person.
Yeah, yeah. So something interesting as I was preparing for this, I wasn't expecting this, but there was an article in AARP about bullying, which really surprised me because in AARP, one wouldn't think that there'd be a bullying, that demographic would have bullying. So I'm just curious, and we do have a question, which I'm so excited about, but I'm just curious if either of you had to deal with a bullying like situation where you had to take someone to task for that kind, like for their instinctive way of communicating that was really not helpful.
Teresa, you might have more of an openness in your field than I did. I can't think of a time where there was a true bullying opportunity or something that was seen or heard as, or related to bullying. Not so much for me.
Yeah, there's cases. I think people masked it, right? Some people don't. I don't like to call things microaggressions because I feel like everything's you say the way you say something you may not have the intention, but do you recognize the impact? And so the cases like when you start seeing what is bullying, folks are like, well, I didn't bully. Like we're not, shaking somebody because they want lunch money anymore.
Right.
Especially in the workplace, like nobody's necessarily doing that, but there are things where folks are leaving folks out off of emails or per my email, like I need to let you know because you threw me under the bus there. So like there is a sense of those things, or you have office chatter. So those things can all be seen as bullying. And what it is that it's the behavior. And I think it goes back to company culture, and what you establish of what your norms are from the jump. Like you want to, those types of things are preventative if you are saying we do not tolerate that. I remember working in a nonprofit where I coached a lot of young adults, and every season when they would gather at the start of the year, I would say, hey, what are our norms? Like I want to hear from you. I'm not here to say these are the rules. I want to hear what you have to say about this. As a collective, what are we tolerating and what are we not? Now that everybody has their input, and everything. All right, cool. Then this is our standard. This is how we're going to hold each other accountable. And I think if companies just rely on just HR to be like, oh, they're the bully polices or the bad, behavior polices, then we're not doing ourselves a justice. And that goes back to just community as a society. We're a very communal people by nature. So we have, as a society, want to uphold these standards or values. So there's opportunities for, I feel like, having hard conversations. That's destined to happen. So it's not necessarily anything specific that I could say, but I think how, as a company culture, how we say we're going to address these things does go a long way.
I love that. Developing the culture, right? Giving that, putting that opportunity up front, developing the culture so that that tolerance, right, is different for everybody. I might not think it's bullying because of my generation. Ferrisa might. So what is that to you? What is our culture? Let's get this up front so we can all agree. I love that. Love that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to talk about company culture because I think we're in a unique moment in history in this next, 104 days or however it's being positioned. But someone is really curious about the opportunity for humor in breaking tension. And so, of course, we talked about not using sarcasm is not the way, for sure. And one tool that I use, I don't like to tell women to use this too often, but some kind of a self-deprecating moment, a human moment, I think can definitely break tension. And I'm curious if you all have any experience kind of using humor at work and what the boundaries are around that.
I don't love the word self-deprecating, Dani, but I know what you mean. I identify with that sort of like you can laugh at yourself, right? Like a silly thing. You make yourself human and you show that human side by using a little silliness, a little comedy, not sarcasm. I would agree with that 100% because sarcasm is different things to different people, but humanizing yourself with a little giggle, like, it was one of those mornings I lost my phone again. You guys, can you believe it? I'm always losing my phone. Like, so you're humanizing yourself in front of everybody and not taking yourself too seriously, right?
Yes.
You're not deprecating, but you're just like, look, guys, I lost my phone again. Thank you for waiting. You guys know that I lose my phone all the time. Thank you for putting up with me. And then they're like, oh, wow. Like, yeah, she's human, right? Things are happening to her and she's able to laugh about the fact that she lost her phone again. So I think just creating like a little bit of like silliness and being able to humanize yourself in front of your team is super valuable. Time and a place, of course. Time and place. Yeah.
Right.
I feel like you have to know your audience because I'm big on humor naturally. I like to think I'm a funny person, but I may not be everybody's cup of tea and it may not be the appropriate time. And I think it goes back to that culture of what you said, I work in a lot of media, pop culture things. So like there's things that are happening that folks want to talk about or joke about, but it's also, again, going back to like, okay, we can build this into our, our team meeting. It's a natural thing, but I think some folks don't take certain things lightly. I believe words matter. Like I am very mindful in the line of work of like, I represent not only myself, but my boss, my teammates. And so for me to be my authentic self, I feel like that requires somebody to get to know me and like know, okay, what's humorous, but I don't really do the whole self-deprecating jokes or those things, or just be even like, because it's a fine line, right? Like I even have to catch some folks who naturally have bad self-talk. And it's like, that's something that they may be working on outside of work. So like, there's opportunity to be like, oh no, you didn't do anything wrong. Like, silly moments happen. That's a humor moment that's nice there, but they went, a totally different direction with it. So I try to like, create space for folks to be able to say, okay, yeah, today we're going to laugh. All right, let's have a moment. Let's talk. And then, okay, we can move forward.
Yeah. I mean, we definitely want to be looking for the moments where silly is okay.
Yeah.
Because things are heavy and in all industries at this point, there's those, stuff has meaning and weight. And so to pay attention to, well, what's a moment where, we can just be silly. And I do think that that does break tension. So someone says in the chat about like, nobody's perfect. I'm not sure I saw that episode of The Good Place, but definitely that sentiment of we're not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. Now for us, of course, we really feel that the imperfection, the thing that goes wrong could possibly be the thing that creates innovation. So for sure, we do a whole thing of if any mistake and everybody's supposed to applaud. Like you just applaud, yeah, and it's such a silly thing. That's another thing, like being physical is a way to break tension. Even just a silly gesture, a physical gesture can kind of shake up the energy in the room.
I mean,
So
don't they have like goat laughter therapy now? I mean, like it's really, evolved into, like you said, that physical, like, again, going back to working with Laughter on Call and working with Nikki, like she's so animated and so stunning to look at, and she has this energy, and you're immediately put at ease, whether you're an introvert, an extrovert, a senior, whether you've had a bad day, it doesn't matter. Her ability to let go and just sort of be in that moment, and that as her authentic self, is such a relief. It puts you at ease, right? It puts the recipient, I'm just like, oh, she's so like naturally cool. Like, oh wow, she's just got this ease. And I think that it's not silly, but it's like this realness, and it relaxes your tension. You forget about like that call in 5 minutes or who's walking in the door. You're like, you want to put the focus on her and sort of capture that moment of energy to release the tension and what's going on. So it's not just laughter per se. I think it's an energy.
totally.
So yeah.
And I think to even get to somebody to that place, because it's twofold, right? Like one, I feel like because today's self-care, right? I feel like you can't help anybody until you help yourself first.
Yeah.
So like discovering yourself of how you laugh, what gets you relaxed and stuff. Right now I'm standing, you would probably not know because we're on Zoom, but like for me, I wanted to feel grounded. So like body language definitely goes a long way. I see somebody also mentions in this chat smiling. I get that a lot personally, but I also know that a bulk of my job is just really talking to people. And so I'm like, yeah, I know you have a functional job, but like, I want to talk to you about XYZ, and giving them that attention really goes such a long way for them to be able to create those silly moments or those moments of peace where they can be like, all right, I'm good. Like, or even going back to the icebreakers, because y'all mentioned it earlier. I remember working on a team, and maybe this is like summer camp culture. So shout out to all my summer camp counselors, because we are here, we are working in the fields, like out here. But like just getting folks up to like dance or, just give shake. Definitely. Or like, hey, turn off the camera, 5 minutes and stuff, go walk around and everything, get the shakes off, and then come back makes such a difference. And I feel like if teams start doing little things like that, first 5 minute call, like, do we really need an hour meeting? Could we really get this to like 40 minutes and stuff? Could we do 5 minutes of just like, all right, let me just decompress because I've been in back-to-backs. Like, I like to play music. There's like little ways that you can like add a little razzle dazzle in the day.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I used to do voiceover work, they would say, now put a smile in your voice, put a smile in your voice. And I do find that if you literally smile, your voice sounds different.
Right.
Like not to be phony, not, yeah, hi everyone, thanks for coming. But to give yourself permission to find the moment of joy, to find the thing that makes you laugh, or wonder, a sense of wonder, a flower, a really good cup of coffee, like taking the time on a granular level to find what brings a little bit of happiness to you, it's contagious. So especially from the top down, if we're talking about leadership, yes, you could say, okay, turn your cameras off and go away for 5 minutes and jump around, but you could also not turn your cameras off and have someone jump around and be silly and set an example of like, this is what I have to do to like be present, and not, You know, it's an interesting thing that you were saying for us, like we're all on the same team and that we're a we. You both talked about we and being we. And I think it's gonna be tough, and it's been a little tough to be a we when people have very strong opinions about how we're not a we. So I think we, you know what I mean, who feel like, no, we're not a we because you think that and I think this, and so we're not a we. And I think, you know, going to that deeper place where we find the we, like, yes, we have a different opinion, but, you know, I'm thinking of some Shakespeare quote. I'm not gonna, you know, if I cut, don't we all bleed? Or so there's some Shakespeare quote. You were a theater major, I know, Ferrisa.
I'm
You
following
went
what you're laying down.
You totally went to performing arts high school. I found that out. So you definitely know about Shakespeare. But that's really, I think, another additional point or aspiration of leadership in the coming months is like, okay, what is appropriate? You know, you talk about creating culture. So setting some parameters about what can we talk about so that everybody feels safe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So
I mean, folks are coming masking themselves because, and I say masking post COVID, right? Literally and figuratively, people are not showing themselves at work. No matter what industry that you work at, folks, whether you're in school or whatever, like folks feel like, I don't know if they're gonna like me. Like going back to like our inner child selves, like folks are like, I don't know if I can say this, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. Like when I think of like laughter or just being silly, that requires a level of putting yourself out there and
yeah.
not hearing what other people think. And as much as I would love to say work is just something you just do, I also feel like it takes a certain level of emotional self-awareness of like, where do I feel comfortable with? Because I think oftentimes folks just want folks to come to work and just do something and then clock out and go home, but it's so they're whole, like they're a whole human. So like getting them to a place where they can be able to say, no matter I don't agree with this, I feel comfortable voicing my opinion or voicing this different POV because you may not like it, but at the same time, like I know this is a safe space for me to be able to vocalize and then we can move forward. So like even being anxious and excitement, those are the same chemical in our brain. So it's all about perception of how you're perceiving things. So a lot of the work I try to tell my mentees and stuff like, control what you can't control. And the only thing you can control is self. So when I go into tension moments or in work culture places, because people may not know me, especially if I'm a new person and everything, I just want to say, oh yeah, this is what I'm comfortable with. Or like, hey, oh, I didn't really feel comfortable about that. Take a step back, reassess. All right, move forward. This is how they like to do things. I'm not going to change who I am, but there is a level of self-awareness I have to be like, okay, this is where I'm going to tap out or I'm going to lean more into.
I think
Yeah.
that's like culture goals, right? Like I don't think we're there yet, especially Ferrisa with my generation. We're not there yet. We're not that able to be vulnerable to where we can say this is what's going to work for me, this sense of humor, my communication style. We're sort of OGs, right? I mean, I'm allowed to say that because I'm an OG. We're sort of OGs, right? We come from a different place of communication. Everything was not viewed in the moment, in the second, right? We had to like kind of like forage for our information or pass it along, right? We didn't have instant access to everything. So, being sort of from an older school, it's hard to kind of come in and be like, this is who I am. This is my authentic self. Like, this is how I communicate. This is how I want to be communicated with. It's hard. Those are culture goals. I feel like now in this day and age, like we're getting there, certainly. But there's still some OGs that do it a little differently, and it takes a little bit longer to move that needle, build that trusting relationship. There's a relationship that needs to be built on trust. Like, can I open up in front of this team, or should I just be quiet, do what I'm expected to do, take the feedback, go home and like, blow off steam or be miserable and not want to go to work the next day and have anxiety. So like we're learning in my generation to like how do we make those connections and communicate safely in that space? We are learning how to actively listen in my generation. We didn't really grow up with that stuff. So,
yeah, there's multiple generations in the workplace, and I think that's so important to name. It is so important to name.
call it
And
out.
like a bulk of my work is really meeting people where they're at in all their journeys. So I see it from, the top down. And I think, you have Gen Z in the workplace. You still have quote unquote boomers or millennials or zennials or all the things, and people who are or who are already parenting, Gen Alpha. So, not showing grace. Like it's okay not to be there yet, but like I think that's where it goes back to the self-awareness. It's different when you're coaching somebody who wants to grow and learn. And then you have those people who are like, my brain has already frozen in time and I'm kind of who I am at this moment. And I don't want to
Can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Like from that generation, like can't teach it. I love that how you connected that. It is that you're sort of programmed already, right? You're pre-programmed to like, this is old school business and this is the way we used to do things. But if you don't change, you can evolve, right? And if you don't evolve, how are you going to learn? And if you don't learn, how are you going to grow? So that evolution, that what we were just speaking of, that's culture goals, right? That's culture goals. And
well, the end of that sentence, I think, is if you can't grow and learn and compete, and grow, you can't compete. And I think that speaks to the business psychology of like the bottom line. Like if it's the bottom line that motivates you to then be open and grow and learn and try to deal intergenerationally and accept new terms and ways of being, then so be it. Like if that's what it takes, it's still the end goal is positive and allows for the boomers, which I think I'm kind of in the boomer.
I don't think you're a boomer.
If that's the motivation, then great, because I know that we do spend some time kind of really landing the point that this is not just silly, look at the fun people. It's, it's that what you're really talking about is connection. And part of the issue is that post-COVID, a lot of companies it's still a hybrid world. And I spoke to a company this morning that had previously 10 floors of commercial space. And now they have 3 floors of commercial space. Do you know there's been a contraction of communal space for people? And so you really do have to make that extra effort to have the connection and to learn the social ways of expressing yourselves. So, before we say goodbye to these lovely folks, I wonder if you could just share with us just 1 or 2 things that you do for self-care, since it's Self-Care Day, International Self-Care Day, that releases tension for you. So I don't know who wants to go first.
I heard on the radio a few days ago, self-care is being labeled now differently than back then. And I'm not going to go on and on, but self-care is survival. Self-care is being able to feed yourself, being able to clothe yourself, having a roof over your head. That's self-care. But what we do now that's labeled as self-care really is learning how to better ourselves through what brings us joy. So self-care, we are caring for ourselves every day. I don't need a self-care Saturday because I take care of myself every day, right? I do the things I need to do to survive. But how do I like break the tension or like treat myself, right? I love a long hike. I love being outdoors in nature, at the beach, at the botanical gardens, grounding and connecting away from that survival mode, away from the phone, away from the laundry, away from the bills, right? So that's how I sort of like reconnect, is by being outside for sure. Nature, the beach, the mountains, the gardens, that's my happy place. But I'm self-caring every day by surviving, right? Yeah. It really resonated with me. I heard it on a podcast and I was like, wow, she's so right. Like self-care is survival. But then she was like, is the chocolate bar self-care? No, it's bringing you joy. How to bring yourself joy in those moments of your daily survival.
Yeah, okay,
Very
revised.
interesting perspective.
I mean, just building off of that, just naturally how I envision self-care is, to your point, what brings you joy. And it's like, I can't help, I love helping people, but I can't help anybody until I help myself first. And then when I start thinking of like showing up, I think a lot of companies put, especially when it comes to hiring, like, oh, are you the perfect fit for, me, like for us, to come, where it should be, we should be asking ourselves of, how can they get the best version out of me if I'm showing up?
Yeah.
So what are my values? Not just career values, but personal values and everything. Okay, I don't like to be stressed out. I think that's a bunch of us, but when do I find myself in stressful situations? How do I react? Okay, I don't like that. So what can I do on my end to prevent getting there? Okay, does that look like waking up a little earlier so I can have a more of a slow morning? I don't like to be rushed. Does that look like me, carving out time and being intentional with what goes on my calendar so I can create more space for the things I want to do? Is that required work? Yes. Like, okay, great. I need to schedule the massage. Love that for me. I'm going to a concert every week next month. Like, that brings me joy. And also community. I personally, women, we are very nurturing. And so when we're around other women, we get an instant recharge. Like, I just look better. Clearly, these lovely ladies that I'm with, like, we're all just a glowing. So like, conversations like that of making sure I make time for my community, my tribe, like, is so important for me. So those are ways I don't ever want to feel like I'm in survival mode. And in order for somebody to ever get the best out of me, I have to take care of myself.
Yeah, I like that. We've got
Brilliant.
outdoors, music, live music apparently is very important to Ferrisa. Of course, I'm very interested in what concerts you're going to. And community, right? Community is so important. And it just has to be, I think there was a time when work was community, when I was a paralegal in the late 80s, and like you went out to drinks after work, like you had a built-in community. And now you have to be proactive, about creating that and making that time. So thank you all for making the time to have this conversation today. We have a minute. If anybody wants to shoot a question, we're here for sure to answer, and really appreciate all the participation today. Really love using the chat. Let's see, you can find Nicole at Watermark, Ferrisa. If you want to put any of your social media in the chat, Ferrisa, so people can find you. And of
Dani
course,
knows I don't have social media first. So that's why she said if they want to find you.
oh, you don't have social media,
No.
Nicole. No, I kind of I don't know why I figured that. I don't know. But thank you so much, everyone. Laughter on Call, you know where to reach us. And I'm Dani, and wishing everyone a really wonderful self-care filled, tension-free afternoon. Thanks so
Thank you,
much for joining
Dani.
us. Thanks, you guys.